Hi, Manit.
Hi, Abhishek.
Hi. Santosh, should I start?
Yes.
Okay. So welcome everybody on this very exciting webinar. Thanks for being here with us. Today we're going to be talking of how we rethink residential and commercial spaces in the new normal. And who better than Mr. Manit Rastogi, who our invitation. Manit, just a little bit about Manit. He doesn't need much of an introduction, but he's an internationally renowned architect and the founding partner of Morphogenesis, one of the largest architectural firms in India and listed amongst the top 100 architectural firms globally. He's a leading speaker in sustainable design, having lectured at numerous reputed universities and conferences worldwide. As a founder member of Griha Council, India's own green rating system, Manit also works actively with urban policymakers to spearhead initiatives with an emphasis on environmental sensibility and socio-cultural sustainability. A winner of over 100 prestigious awards and an author of over 1,000 publications in journals. He is a fellow of the Indian Institute of Architects, the Royal Society of Arts, and a chartered member of the Royal Institute of British Architects. Moreover, he's a very, very dear friend of mine, and we've shared a lot of interesting conversations in the past revolving around design and build. So with the introduction of Manit, let me give you a flow of the event today. I think rather than having a fireside chat, we would look at a fireside chat rather than a address by Manit. I think that's more interactive. And please, anybody who has any questions, please put it on the chat. We would be more than happy to answer as many as we can. We're going to keep it extremely interactive. So Manit, would you have any opening statements?
Well, thank you, Abhishek, and welcome everyone. And welcome to Lockdown 4.0. And I think that series has been picked to continue for a while. But other than that, I'm happy to go, so fire away.
Great. Thank you, Manit. So let me begin with a very broad question to set the context. So, Manit, how will COVID-19 change the way we design, plan our cities, and experience our built environment?
So, Abhishek, if one was to see the basic fundamentals of how we've thought about city planning, and not recently, but say for even the last 1,000 years, the idea has really been about bringing people together, increasing density, and a lot of that has gone around notions of TOD, transit-oriented development, because of mobility issues, going vertical. I mean, lifts allowed us to go vertical, cars allowed us to go horizontal. And with the net consequence that today we are, we have 5,000 cities in India, and I'll keep myself focused more on India, because I guess that's more relevant. But we are now going to see, I think we're going to see a transformational change in that form of thinking. And I think what we will begin to see a little bit more of is the fact that what begins to happen when the fundamental premise, which was about bringing people together and increasing density. Can you hear me, Abhishek?
Yes, I can. I'm on mute.
Okay. When a human being becomes a weapon for another human being, then that very premise of the city gets brought into question. And I think what we are going to begin to see about cities is the fact that residential design, commercial designs, office and of how you work and how you live, the two most fundamental parts of how our cities are built, are going to change. So, previously CBDs were built, high commercial densities, residential was taken to only residential locations. And I think that's going to break down. I think we need to see a lot more mixed-use developments. I think we will begin to see more polycentric, polynodal method of urban development, where one glove doesn't fit all. You can't have a city, the rules that apply to a city that's 50,000 work for a city that's 20, 30 million, and that's where our cities are going. So I think our mega cities will have to begin to look like a conglomeration of much smaller micro cities, with a lot more walk to work a lot more slow mode mobility, walking, cycling, separated by green belts, but interconnected through good for high levels of public transport, but more personalized public transport. So I do see a radical shift in the thinking, and this has always happened. Every time a pandemic hits, if you look at the last 100 years, we've had the great water systems and sanitation system put in globally only after a pandemic. And I think we will see some really interesting outcomes of this, hopefully from the policy side.
So the last pandemic hit us when we were 1/3 our population, the global population. So I think that's a lot to look into because and count. And hopefully, as we see, this pandemic is not killing that many people as a percentage of the global population. So let me come to the next question. So residential sector is always centered around designing smaller and cheaper apartments. That's where the demand is at the middle class and the upper middle class. Moving forward, how will this change? And what will be the revised guidelines for designing residential complex? And a follow-up question, given a free hand, how would you design the most ideal space? Give a suggestion to a developer for a 2 and 3 BHK.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. What we've, depending on how the economy functions, either apartments get larger or they get smaller, with a lag to the economy. And the problem of residential design is buildings take much longer to build than how the economy behaves. But where we are today is that our homes, our apartments are being used for a lot more than what they were designed for. And they were being used in ways that are unprecedented. They're being used as a school, they're being used as an office, they're being used for eating, for living, they're used for recreation. And it's the same small 2 BHK/3 BHK that's serving that need. Now, if I was to look at the fact that how would that design change moving forward? And we've been doing a lot of work in that space, not only alone, but with a lot of the key developers that we work with across India. And like I said earlier, one glove doesn't fit all. It is centric to the local community, the climate, the context, the culture, etc. But on a broad sweep, look at it this way. Look at the home that you live in, or anyone lives in an apartment. Okay, if you get hot, you need an air conditioner. If you want to breathe, you need a filter. If you want to have water, you need a purifier. If you want energy, you need an inverter or a UPS, even though your complex may be sitting on a centralized DG. If you need to go anywhere, you can barely walk to anywhere without having a car or public transport, which may or may not require a driver, and you'll require a tremendous amount of parking space. And most parking spaces are hellholes when it comes to health and hygiene because they're mechanically ventilated and mechanically lit. For safety, you need a guard or a CCTV, and inside the apartment for noise and visual privacy, you put up walls, doors, and windows. Now, this is really upside down thinking for the fact that we're living in 2020. Probably 1820 was better than this. So there are fundamental aspects that need to be thought about. So we need to stop thinking about a 2 BHK in terms of only 600, 800, 900 square feet carpet areas, or that is important because cost will always be critical. But we need to start looking at the 2 BHK, and that's what we are doing, as an ecosystem. What comes in, what goes out, how is it used? So instead of calling it 2 BHK, if we look at it as 4 spaces, right? So you have the 2 bedrooms, the hall, and the kitchen. But don't look at it as 2 bedrooms. That's a very Victorian notional concept of modernist design, where one space had one function. Now, if we begin to look at 4 spaces and we say all these 4 spaces have to be multifunctional, then how do we design the apartment? So you bring into question, what does a wall really do? A wall essentially provides you sound and visual privacy. A door does the same thing. A window does an environmental filter. How do we reconfigure that in a way that allows each space to be multifunctional? So for example, what we've already started to do in all our projects is one of the rooms is independently accessible from outside so that it can be used as a home office. What we've begun to do is that the kitchen now is being increased in size, but taking area out of some other places so that it serves the need of dining and eating, because a lot of this, the fact that we're very centric on support and service staff will reduce in time. I think we will start seeing in a lot more fully fitted out kitchens where cooking, cleaning, washing, etc., will be more or less automated. What we're beginning to do is to understand the importance of outdoor space in small apartments. Now, in cities where balconies are in FSI, we've seen balconies disappear. And in cities where balconies are not in FAR, we've seen that they have not been fully exploited because balconies are still fully loaded to the sale price of the apartment. So it is so, given the condition, we're now designing one of these 4 spaces to fully open up, so it turns into an outdoor veranda. So in a sense, you get a little plot of land, one of the room turns into that, and no matter what height you're at. What we're beginning to do is to look at technology where we get rid of any stagnant space. So for example, a shaft is a stagnant space. If you have a false ceiling plenum, that's stagnant there, ducts, etc. So to get rid of all of that technology and look at other forms of technology that will allow for that level of comfort to happen without having to have enclosed spaces. So, whether it's radiant cooling with low velocity fans, etc., etc. A lot of that is beginning to go in, not to mention connectivity and all of that. What we're also beginning to do, and that's came out of a lot of learnings from COVID, is senior living. Okay, now in a lot of cities in India, there is no difference between families or joint families, and even where families have been nucleated, may end up with an elder at this point in time. So we are designing. So I would design the 2 BHK, where one of the toilets would be fully handicapped / universal access. For that to happen, we would design it in a way that there is a call button for emergency. The privileges or the amenities provided in senior living will have to be integrated back now into the 2 BHK. So the idea really is that how do you take the 2 BHK and make it feel like a bungalow? By moving away from the one function, one space concept to a multiplicity of concepts where it begins to function not as 4 spaces, but as 10, 12, 13 different spaces, depending on the time of the day. And design should enable that to happen.
So correctly said, Manit, but any thoughts on, so we've been dealing with a lot of developers, and you're very right that the 2 BHK will get fitted out and it would look at.
May I request you to rephrase that, as some of them may be on call. So instead of dealing with, how about working with?
Yeah. Okay. So we've been in their design. We're in bed with them right from stage 1 as to how they're designing, and that's why we're looking at our tiles and sanitary ware. But coming back to your question, your answer, in fact, the spaces which are now looked at 4 or 5 different, and you mentioned 14 different spaces. There is a limit to how much you can compromise out of something in a 2 BHK, which is typically between 400 and 800. And on all of these condominiums, we've seen the developers all look at a clubhouse, all look at a swimming pool and recreation spaces and all of that. Do you also see going forward that they would have maybe a floor or half a floor made into a co-working space? Because there is only so much you can do with a 400 and 800 kind of space. So maybe instead of having that fit out within the apartment, look at half the floor into a co-working space where the building owners have, for example, we buy a parking space every time we buy a flat. We buy 2 co-working spaces every time we buy a flat, and make that into a beautiful ecosystem so that you get out of your home, you're not cooped up. Any thoughts on that? Will they be looking at those kind of new ideas?
So Abhishek, we copyrighted a design philosophy called SOUL: sustainability, optimization, uniqueness, and livability. Okay, and one of the key aspects of livability was that because apartments were getting smaller, we started looking at the outdoor space. Now, given the climate that we are in, okay, so Bangalore is very lucky, and Delhi is absolutely not. We have 3 very different seasons, and again in Bombay we are not, because it's got that sort of fun. It's got a flattish season of high humidity plus an aggressive monsoon. However, our analysis has shown that by master planning in the correct way, you can make the outdoor space, and that outdoor space is roughly can vary between 50 to 70% of openness. Okay, depending on the FARs and the densities, can be made usable for about 80% of the year, irrespective of the city. Now, when you begin to do that, landscape design, which is something that is another area of research that we've been doing with the landscape team, is to start integrating a lot of activity outdoor. So we are talking now about, say, taking the club and disintegrating it into the entire landscape, outdoor workspaces, however they have to be comfortable through the year, by and large if possible, so that the entire horizontal plane of the development is put into use, functional use for people, rather than just as an aesthetic or a garden or a lawn or etc. And it becomes an extension of your 2 BHK. So it allows you that flexibility, but that requires a critical amount of thinking in terms of shading, in terms of harnessing the winds, in terms of shadows from the buildings, creating comfort, transpiration from the landscape, dry misting if it's really hot, etc., etc. But that outdoor space is absolutely critical. In fact, in what we are now doing in several projects, and we are doing this midway, is even if there's a vertical tower, say, going up 20, 30 stories, every 2-3 stories attached to the lobby, we're doing a micro outdoor space. So that every 2 to 3 floors, so that's say maybe 10, 12 apartments, can use that micro space for the really old and the really young, or even for the, kids can just, step out and read a book on a bench, and that outdoor space, say, is about, 150, 20 square feet divided across 12 apartments, and it serves provides a great need. So, we really have to begin to utilize just about everything. We have now begun to see that working with limited resources, and that is what we are in India. No matter what anyone thinks, we are sitting on limited resources, and how can we maximize every single element of that?
Yeah. I mean, considering we're going to be spending a lot more time at home, shorter working hours, working from home is a short-term phenomenon in my mind, very largely. But yes, we will be traveling way less because the Zoom meetings, the webinars, etc., the team meetings have just made it very simple for us to communicate, and very effectively. This technology is only going to get better. So on the backdrop of that, do you think there would be a little bit of cheer for the real estate guys, where they would have people, gunning for the person who was looking for a 1-bedroom, looking for a 2 and a 2 to a 3? Would there be some cheer for the developers? What do you think?
Yes, I mean, I think that will definitively be a short-term shift. However, affordability is always going to be critical. Right. So the trick of the game is going to lie in, how do you provide more for less effectively? I mean, there's no question about the fact that someone's got a 1 BHK will want a 2. The question is, so, and I think this is where a huge thrust on technology is going to help. So I think buildings will just have to move away from this really archaic construction process that we've been following, which hasn't really improved in the last 500 years, by and large, to a more manufacturing based process where you are able to optimize every single element that goes into that building for A, its life cycle, and B, its tolerance. And until we begin to think of buildings like that, so we are working. So I guess a lot of architects do work on BIM. So we are designing fully in 3D with the entire building information sitting there. Now, what we're looking at is how do we take that BIM technology, which we have designed the building with, and adapt it to a rapid manufacturing process, or to a off-site precast, or process where a building is more an assembly, like a car. So, if you take an example, a car, right, is what's say 4 meters by 2 meters, that's 8 square meters, say 100 square feet, and you can buy for 100 square feet, you can buy a car at 10 lakh rupees, and that's roughly 10,000 rupees a square foot. Now that car, other than the fact that it can move around at great speeds, it can provide air conditioning, it can do a lot of things, it's still coming much cheaper than the per square foot rate of most residential developments. A lift in a building costs more than a car, and that it's a simple box that goes up and down with very little else to do. Okay, so I think that there's going to be a lot of thrust in thinking about this technology. How can we build fast, quick? How can we build with materials that are resilient, low maintenance, are adaptive to this kind of manufacturing based process? And I think that's really the thrust where we will be able to find a lot of economies in compared to the processes that we currently run in how we build.
So, there's a couple of questions on the chat. I would jump to that for a second. One of the questions is, how will we look at lifts? Because that's going to be a huge issue both in residential and in commercial spaces. Commercial spaces across the country, residential mostly in the Bombay kind of cities. And also there's another question as to how people will look at central air conditioning. Is that going to be changed? How would one look at that? Is there any myths around that?
Yes. So, no. So, again, we did a lot more work on vertical transportation in this COVID time for commercial buildings. And the reason for that is that, if you take a typical, say, building, commercial 5 lakh square feet, population calculation would be at about 5,000 to 6,000 people in the building. You may end up with 10 to 12 lifts, which are all 20 packs each. However, you're not going to be able to put 20 people in a lift anymore, because social distancing norms will allow you maybe 5 or 6. And you're pushing 5,000 people into the same lobby, then distributing them to these lifts.
Correct.
So we reworked an entire modeling strategy where we are now looking at buildings as interlocked buildings. So instead of having high core, low core, or DCS, destination control system, we're saying, imagine the building. It's a 20-story building or 10-story, whatever it is, as 4 different buildings stacked on top of each other with their own dedicated lift co coming and only servicing the 5, with independent lobbies segregated through, say, the basements or so you take the 5,000 people and you divide them out, and essentially then it becomes it becomes 5 buildings of about 1 lakh square feet with 1,000 people working only to 5 floors. So you keep thinking of innovative ways to break it down. Now, our second argument is this, that if social distancing continues, offices will not be at the same capacity either. So there won't be 5,000 people in the building, there'll be 3,000 people in the building, or 2,500. And if you combine these factors, you can solve the vertical transportation mobility even with existing technology. And same rules will apply to resi.
Yeah.
We've got to start thinking of vertical buildings as a stack of smaller buildings on top of each other, independently serviced, yet keeping costs in check by using VT, vertical transportation, in a novel way. And we've had some really encouraging results on this. And why we are sort of, if I may use the term, kicking our butt, is that it was available all along. Why didn't we do it before? And I guess it's just that necessity is the mother of invention. So it just pushes you to do a lot more with that.
Yeah. And what about the myth around central air conditioning? That's a big carrier of any kind of disease, which is kind of true, but how would one look at that?
So it's not true. Okay. However, we have a key opinion on that. Okay. So if you look at so central air conditioning is used a lot more in commercial buildings than it is in residential. Residential tend to be a little bit more either splits or VRV or individual room-based units. If you look at commercial buildings now, most of the buildings that we have designed and are operational, depending on which city they are in, are operating at about close to 600 to 700 square feet per ton of air conditioning. Okay, as compared to, say, a norm of 250 to 300. So that's already less than half. But how? Simply because we did a lot of research on traditional old buildings. When I tell you why is a fort cool in the summer naturally, okay, and a lot of this had to do with things like orientation, keeping the sun out, and one thing that we really know is where the bloody sun is. I mean, that's the one determinant that never changes, and probably and it doesn't cost you anything. So the first step is to knock half the air conditioning out. The second step is to allow for the fact that you can do that air conditioning without having to put a plenum or a false ceiling in. Now, if someone does the interiors like that, good for them. Right. So we are dead against having any space, whether it's water or air, which is stagnant. Right. Now, what you do with that is you hybrid it. Okay. So at night, all you have to do is reverse it. So that's called a night purge. The outdoor air is much cooler at night than it is in the day, and all the buildup of CO2 inside. Now, what is air conditioning really doing? It's taking out the humidity, dropping the temperature a bit, and the fresh air is being pumped in because as humans we need to get oxygen, and we're pumping out CO2. Okay, so if you use a night purge, it in any case brings the requirement down a lot. The whole point here, okay, is using the same system, cutting down how much you need, right? But by following the principles of how we did this when we didn't have energy, you can bring down the consumption tremendously. Now, if you're going to be at social distancing, now we normally put in 20 CFM of air for increasing the oxygen levels inside per person, right? But if there are only going to be half the number of people in there, and you're going to use your own air conditioning, so get your air conditioning system hooked up to CO2 sensors. Let it kick in when the CO2 levels rise, not just run on its own.
Right.
Okay. So of course, I have friends in the air conditioning industry and they won't like this, but that's a lobby. Their job is to sell air conditioning. Okay. So the Americans, when ASHRAE about 20, 30 years back came out with a code which said, at what temperature are you comfortable? Okay. They defined it as 22 to 24 degrees Celsius, a 2-degree range, and a relative humidity of 55 to 60%, a 5% range. Whether you were in Alaska or whether you were in Texas. Okay. Our argument was, that's why we, 10 years back we set up WIHA, that the human comfort range is much larger. If it is 18 degrees outside, I'm comfortable at 20 inside. If it is 45 degrees outside, like say it gets in Delhi, I'm even comfortable at 27 degrees inside. That spread is enough to knock down the requirement of central air conditioning tremendously. So it's the lobby pushing the industry. So there are many factors at play, but then the one thing that no one can take away from what we are really good at is common sense. And combination of common sense and learning from traditional wisdom using modern technology provides a lot of solutions.
So net, you're saying the air conditioning, there are various ways of solving this issue of the disease or any kind of disease not falling through.
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, because that will be very, very, very crucial for even malls and larger spaces where are huge public spaces.
Well, the one thing that we haven't done well at all in this country is to build public spaces.
Yeah.
And that's but that's a subject matter probably of another conversation.
True. So having said this, apart from talking of our industry, apart from the double charge tiles and the soluble salt tiles, most of the tiles are completely non-porous, which means that they're extremely hygienic. And hygiene being a standpoint, do you see a lot more spaces using these kind of products or maybe certain alternatives?
So I do see a move away, and I do see a move away from high absorptive materials, say like carpets. Correct. Or carpet tiles. I do see a move away from natural materials. So, various kinds of stones, whether it's marbles or granites or whatever.
They're very porous.
They're porous. The joints are not perfectly sealed. The maintainability, the transportability, and the installability. Yeah. Okay. So when I'm talking about, say, building moving a lot more to a manufacturing kind of process, so the reliance on contract materials. Okay, and by contract materials, I mean materials that can be fixed using a system, materials that are low absorptive, materials and locally available. Okay, I think we will see a big shift to that.
Right. So, a couple of questions came up on the chat, and also I have one question on commercial space. This is an interesting one which we had discussed even earlier. So in the likelihood of COVID-19 on the commercial market, there seems to be completely different views and different trends. So one is the need for social distancing, which suggests that we would need larger and larger spaces to make our offices larger so that we can maintain the social distance. On the other hand, the real estate and the work from home movement, which will imply that we need lesser real estate. So where do you think we will strike a balance? I mean, is there any method to that madness?
So let me answer it to you in yes. I don't think that these are two different opinions. These are two coexisting opinions. Okay, based on the kind of industry you're in. Okay, so let's take one of the arguments of work from home. This will be more amenable to industries which operate on head count versus brain count, and let me explain that. Companies that operate on headcount, say a lot of the IT companies, can quantify and pay for a code being written rather than time being spent.
Sure.
or number of with a BPO or a KPO. So highly quantifiable, very amenable to work from home. Okay, and there is no real culture, organizational culture that needs to be built around that kind of work. So when TCS says that we'll move to a 25-25 plan, so but why in 2025? Why don't we do it right away? Okay, and my prognosis of that is that in 5 years from now, AI is going to wipe out a lot of those jobs in any case. So they will have only 25% people attending the same offices. Okay, but that's all conjecture, because that kind of work, and 5 years is it's reasonable time to assume that AI will be able to replace those kind of low-level jobs, which was bound to happen in any case, COVID, no COVID. Now, if we flip across to the other side of the argument, which says that we need more space because with social distancing, we've got the same number of people. And why that argument also holds is because that is true. However, if you see from the point that when I started my career 25 years back, the first office that we designed was at 200 square feet per person. Over the years, that 200 came to 150, 100, 90, 80, 70 square feet per person. Okay, and we, people were densifying obviously for cost reasons or whatever. But there was a counter problem of highly increased costs in air conditioning, because air conditioning is highly dependent on your account. So it wasn't just a straight off trade, but your guy who's leasing is looking at that cost, and the guy who's maintaining is looking at another cost, and the two really talk to each other well. So what we do see, there will be an expansion there, but this is also so look, what did we do with our offices? Okay, we've put it to mandatory that 25% on compulsory from home, 75% will attend office. With that in play, plus all the people who are on leave, etc., whatever, we will achieve social distancing of the 1.8 meters, 6 feet distance in the existing space with the existing number of people. Okay, but we will require 25% compulsory work from home on rotation. Okay, so on one side, we may see a contraction of demand, and that will be more for contract kind of workers, contract work. But on another side, there will be an expansion, but it is not going to be expansively large. I think the combination of the two will keep our industry static, exactly how we were moving. So at a holistic level, I don't see either a contraction or a great expansion. I just see the rate of growth being fundamentally that. Of course, a lot of this is dependent on demographics. India is a very young nation with many more people that come into the workforce. So when someone in Europe says that we need more space, okay, they're already on a much higher demographic age group sitting in that same office, spreading out with much lesser people coming into the workforce. So our pressures are different. And so I don't really see anything happening to the commercial space. Yes, there will be consolidation, it'll shift, there'll be maybe fewer developers doing more different kind of project. I do see the fact that there's a middle category in commercial that's completely gone missing. So there's an unorganized sector which leases small offices, and there's an organized sector that does really large offices. And what we will also begin to see, is the hub and spoke model. So rather than have my 300 architects in one big building, okay, which I don't, and we went to this model 5 years back. We have multiple offices, distributed, so based on where our talent is, so that their mobility from home is much easier. So when we pick Bombay, we'll pick an Andheri, and then we'll pick possibly something closer to town. But all our offices are connected. So I think we will see a little bit of that decentralization and localization of that product.
So Manit, you touched upon culture, and I completely understand that there are certain businesses which can easily move to work from home, especially like TCS and maybe certain architectural firms. So look at most of the businesses like ours, which is brick and mortar manufacturing, where we have anyway decentralized a lot of our offices. All our salespeople, we have 500 of them in our company, a little more than that. In fact, they're all in various parts of India. The head office, for that matter, is in Delhi for us. And the other smaller work is in Ahmedabad, which is where our factory is. So I think I have a major question here as to, I'm a strong believer that work from home beyond a point doesn't work for businesses like us. And we will need to bring it in. And I touch upon culture again. How do you develop the culture in the organization, and how do you give that, nurture the culture in the organization if you don't have people coming to the office? So from that point of view, what would be the design changes for me to bring people back to office, make them feel safe, not vulnerable, and also welcome post-COVID? What will we have to do? Because I'm clearly of the thought that work from home for our kind of industries doesn't work. There may be 5% to 10% which will work from home, but not beyond.
Correct. That's what I agree with that. Well, our experience for the last 6 weeks when the lockdown happened, and we were patting ourselves on the back that within less than a day we were 100% work from home. And in fact, I spoke to you about that.
Yeah.
Why did we never do? One of those is, why did we do this before?
Yeah.
But now, okay, we are seeing that if work is to be done as business as usual, it may still work. But if you want to do anything, that is, if you want to innovate, create, strategize, plan, it still requires human presence. It requires that interaction. It requires that body language. It requires the people in the room, and that's what we really miss. So when we opened up, and I'll share this with personal experience, we found that some people were just dying to get into office, and some people were very comfortable working from home. Okay. Then we thought that, so for example, a Bangalore office, which is, which has been which is in the green zone, was 100% open for the last, 2-3 weeks. And what we thought is that, as part of our HR reviews, we measure a metric called engagement. And what we didn't want to do was force people. So we changed that metric recently to motivation from engagement. And motivation, we're thinking about as why does a person get up in the morning and go to work? Not because of the salary. It should not be because of the salary. It should be because they really like the work that they do.
Yeah.
And they're being recognized for the work that they do, and they feel that they're learning and contributing to the organization. Okay, so we put 4 or 5 metrics around this, and we're working to push those metrics from the core team, which makes it attractive for someone to come because that's what they want to do. Rather than, whip people back into office to come and do email off a desk. And I think over a period of time, not that much time, I think culture will drive motivation. Motivation will drive people to work. And those who don't will have clarity. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. But do you see any paradigm shifts in terms of design? So for example, we've seen photographs as a lot of nations build their taxis new in a very different way with the acrylic sheet between the driver and the passenger. Do you see these kind of crazy paradigm shifts happening in an office space?
Yes, I do. I mean, but not that extensively. Okay. There is COVID is not COVID is something that we live with.
Sure.
This is not something that's going to come and go in the next month or two. A. B. What it has also done is, in some senses, it has affected our DNA as to how we interact with our environment and with other people. So it might be COVID today, it might be something else tomorrow. At the end of the day, I think people have come to realize, and those who haven't will, that you have to protect yourself, you have to protect your family, you have to follow the best rules that you can. And if at the end of the day you get it, you get it. I mean, it's like what were we seeing yesterday? Malaria kills 400,000 people a year. They found a vaccine. It didn't stop people going out.
Yeah.
Dengue killed a shitload number of people here. I mean, I was sitting outside on my deck yesterday and got bitten by mosquitoes, and I was telling my wife, how shameful would it be that in a COVID pandemic, I caught it because of dengue. So I think it's just a question of time. We'll get used to it. I don't think we'll see crazy things, but I think what we will see are sensible things. We will begin to, we will see, a better quality ventilation systems in offices. We will see higher reliance on daylighting. We will begin to see, that 50, 60, 70 square feet per person going back to a number that is, not a can of sardines, but it's more amenable. It may not be all the way to 2 meters with, between people. We will see better food hygiene in terms of cafeterias. We may see more outdoor cafeterias or hybrids. So we will see good things, things that we should have always done. because health, safety, hygiene, wellness are the fundamentals of design and real estate development. We'll just have to go back to the fundamentals and rethink it all over again and apply those. Putting screens and this, I don't think that's really and looking like you're working on a spaceship on the way to Mars. No, I don't think that's.
Yeah, I agree with you. So Manit, thank you so much for the insights you've given on both residential and commercial spaces. And I do agree that at the end of the day, we have to go back to logic and our sensibilities. And this COVID, which is what we're going to live with, and there are going to be many more COVIDs coming up. Either this one would mutate or something else will show up. So very clearly, I think this is a wake-up call for us to go back to basics, go back to our logic. I think our greed for so many things has made us overlook a lot of those basic logic. So I do agree. And I think there is clear cheer in the fact that we are not too many months away from finding a medicine, if not a vaccine. And somebody was recently saying that with every passing day, we're getting smarter because we know a lot more about this disease, which helps the doctors and the labs develop the medicine that much quicker. So hopefully,
Sorry, just a quick response. Remember the comment I made on the air and the filter and the
yeah.
So we get a COVID, we make a vaccine.
Yeah.
But you must remember, if we keep pissing around with nature like we have, nature will find its way to balance us in some other way. Yeah. We have to begin to think, in terms of how we build our cities, how we live, that we're part of an ecology. We're not on top of it. There are only that many vaccines we will build. There's only that much we can clean and filter to keep ourselves, alive and kicking. Yeah. So I think also that sort of fundamental rethink on that we're just part of an ecosystem. We're not on top of it. Will be the real change.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was reading somewhere, obviously not authenticated, that somebody has predicted that the Earth has been reset 25 years. So we have 25 more years to live for Earth. So there are certain positives, and I think we can only hope for the best. Viewers, participants, thank you so much for being here. And I think there is one message here, which is go back to basics, use your logic, be safe, stay safe. We all are responsible for each other. And most importantly, review the way we really work and live on a daily basis and what we need and what we don't need. Thank you so much for joining us. We will have a lot more webinars happening from us, some interesting one in the following days. Thank you, Manit. Thank you once again very much for joining us and accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Abhishek. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I'm closing the meeting.
Yes,
yeah.
please. Thank you.